really loose. I'll have to tighten that. But to tighten the belt, it would be this pulley here, and you would tighten it on the back. You got the adjusters right there. If you go to my head cam playlist, I actually show you how to tighten these belts. And the top one, that's actually or actually hooked up to a big fan in the front of the condenser. And when the belt's loose like that, you see this bar, that bar right there, it starts slapping and going ting, 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 ting. When you hear that on reefers, it means that that belt needs to be tightened. And they put a little safety bar around that. And when it gets really loose, like you see, it'll start hitting that and tinging it. And the adjustment is right behind the fuel filter here. And you use that adjustment there, and I'll tighten it, which I'll do. But it's mainly that adjustment and this adjustment is tightening the two belts. The other belt is for the alternator on the side here. And main thing, like you can reach over here and use it. You know, that's pretty tight. But you got the alternator belt. And then you have the belt here that runs along this drive that turns it from vertical to horizontal, and then that brings it right up to the big fan on the top. But it'll start tinging. It flops like that. It's really bad. But you just adjust it. It's just what you do, because those are actually the belts that we used to have. Now there's serpentine belts where you don't have any adjustments. You just have a tension puller that keeps it tight. It doesn't stretch like these belts do. But once I do that, you can see it'll run a lot better. It won't be flopping like that. Okay, I'm in front of the reefer here. You see I have a deck plate right here. It's easier to work on the reefers that way. This belt here is really loose. It flops really bad. When you push on it, it should be about 3/4 of an inch. That's about it. They actually got, for the mechanics, a tension belt measure where they push on this with the gauge, and it'll tell you how many pounds to put it on there. It's really nice to have. But it's actually this bolt and this bolt that you have to loosen. And to loosen it, you have to use a 1/2 inch wrench for this one here, and you have to double it. Anything with diesel mechanic, you double your wrenches, and that's all about doing this. So you can see how you double your wrenches. That way you got leverage on here, and you just pull right down and loosen it. If not, you'll see that all these are bigger bolts than regular cars to loosen that. Same thing, this is a 3/4, and 3/4 is the same thing as that you have to double your wrench. And it's the same thing, grabbing one size bigger, and you actually put it into the wrench itself, just like this. Hope everybody can see that. Zoom in so you can see how you have to double your wrench like that. Once you do that, you have enough leverage so you can pull right down. It's really easy, but that's the trick when it comes to diesel mechanics, is to break everything by doing that. And that way you're not banging anything, you're actually just putting tension on there and loosening it. Once you loosen it, you would take a vice grips and put it on the top here, and you can see this square here. And then you can tighten and loosen this. As you can see, I can pull it back, and the tension itself will get tight. And once you pull back like that, then you go ahead and tighten it with this bolt here, which I could try to do with the 2 hands. I just wanted to tighten that so you have it. Once you do that, then you test it out. You test this out by pushing on it, and it should be only 3/4 of an inch, not an inch, but 3/4 of an inch. I have to go a little tighter on this one. But
that's how you work that. Then you tighten it. But your main thing is holding this vice grip, pulling it down, and then tightening the 2 bolts. Okay, my last part. But you really put your shoulder into it and tighten it that way. But you double these wrenches. Always do that. That way you have enough leverage and you have enough torque on that. Same thing with the 1/2 inch. Once you tighten that, it won't slip on you. But again, it's all about doubling your wrench and really putting your muscle in it and tighten that real good. And that's it. And then take your vice grip off. And then when you push down on the belts, you'll push down and you'll see it's about 3/4 of an inch. That's the same thing with the back. It should be all 3/4 of an inch, not more than an inch, but 3/4. You don't want to go 1/2 inch. It'll start burning bearings up, and these bearings. This here is it moves your belt from vertical to horizontal. That's all this contraption here is all about. It's all geared here, and then this here takes you to the top. But this was flopping really good, but now that should be really good. You should have this much play in the back. In the front, you'll do your 3/4 push, and it should be about 3/4 when you push on it. 3/4 of an inch. And that's it. That's how you tighten this belt here. This other one, you'll have to get a socket, put it on here, and I'll show you all that, how you tighten this one here. But it is flopping pretty good, so I just want to get a little bit more tension here. Okay, over here, you'll see that you have to put a vice grip. Let's see if I can get it around here. You have to get a vice grip on the block. Make sure you don't do it on the pulley. And this is a trick that mechanics do, and that is putting tension on this block here. You can see how I did that. And just putting tension on this block, you'll see the back end is hitting this bar. And that way it's always got tension on here. When you release it, you'll see that it's not square on this pulley. It's actually got a little bit of more room to give. But doing that, you're putting tension on it, and this bar on the top is actually putting pressure on your vice grip. That way, when you loosen this is where you loosen it right here. When you loosen this, that pulley will actually tighten for you. It will start moving and tighten. It will just be a little bit, and then you tighten it, and then you go ahead and do more and more until you can grab it and pull on it. But normally you got a little bit of that angle where this bar is holding the vice grip and putting tension on this belt, because this pulley has to go clockwise to tighten it. And that way this will actually be more about 3/4 of an inch when it comes to this play right here. Right now it's about 1.25 inches play. But then you'll get a socket and loosen this bolt, and then you'll see that the vice grip itself will automatically tighten this because it's leaning against that little bar. Now you'll see that this is really deep in here. This is the nut. You can see that. And the tool that you need, it's a 3/4 inch socket that you would need. And this is the 3/4 socket. I have an adapter to go to that 1/8 inch. And you can see that this socket is not going to work. And you'll need this kind of socket where you can pull on it and extend it. So you can see now it's actually extension now. This slides in and out. So it's not so short, but it's good to have these kind of ratchets when you are on the road, because you can have a short one or a long one. This one you need leverage, so you need this kind of ratchet. And then when you do that, now you got your extensions, it'll stick out enough that you can go ahead and get it right on that nut and loosen it. Once you loosen that with all this leverage, then you can go ahead and let the vice grip itself pull on the pulley by that kind of pressure on that bar, and it'll tighten this belt. Okay, now that this is tight, it's all about testing the belt now. Now the belt, it should be about 3/4. When you push on it, it should be 3/4. Everything is pretty tight now. And then the vice grip you just take off. But that's how you do with the vice grip, is put your tension on that bar. And you see how you put the vice grip in there in that bar. When you squeeze on it, it puts leverage on it, so this bar actually turns. That's the adjustment, is that one bolt and the vice grip to go on the block. Same thing with this block. Put the vice grip on that. Loosen these 2 bolts. But that's it for these belts to be tightened. Those are the tools you need. Over here is the same. You'll have a belt, the alternator itself will be the adjustment on that. The crankcase to this water pump to the alternator. And then if you open up the side door, you have access to the bracket in the back. And that would go ahead and tighten your alternator belt. Again, when you push down, it should be 3/4 of an inch. And that's how it works on these kind of old belts. Now they're serpentine belts. Those are 3 belts that you would actually be tightening on here. Anything else would be on the reefers is that this here is where you check your oil. And I checked it when I left the yard, and it was low. It was on add, as you can see. There's a safe on here, and it's right at the level of where you have to put a quart of oil. And you can see where that's safe. It has to be up to here. So this is low. I have to add that. If you have any problems at all, this here is your fuel filter. And your fuel filter itself is pretty important, because if you run out of fuel, especially any kind of situations, you run out of fuel or it's gelling up or anything in the wintertime, you would take this fuel filter off. And when you take this fuel filter off, then you fill it up with fuel. Once you fill it up, then you go ahead and put this back on, this fuel filter. This here's an oil filter right here, so these are your filters. But when it comes down to the fuel filter, after that's done, then you have to prime it. And when you're out of fuel, you would go ahead and take that fuel filter off, fill it all the way up, and put it back on. And many of these have 2. I'm surprised it only has 1. But you unscrew this primer, and you can see this primer, then you just push down. I grab it, and then you push down, and you're pumping it. And you have to pump this about 300 times. You have to count it. And that way you can get your whole system in. Right when you get pressure, because it'll feel like there's nothing there when you're priming it and pumping it. And but don't be shy. You have to count, so you don't think that it's taking forever. But count up to 300. Many drivers say 280, but I just say 300. And that way it's pulling all the fuel from the reefer tank all the way up to here to get all the air bubbles out, all the way over to this line here, and then this goes to your injectors and all that. But you can see how this pumps that. It's really nice to have a primer pump like that. I noticed the Detroits now finally have primer pumps, because Caterpillars always had it, but the other ones didn't. But this pump is really important, and that way you pump that about 300 times, and then you can get this started again. So many times when the fuel gels up, you would use that, or if you run out of fuel, you fill up and then put fuel in the fuel filter and then pump this up, and then it'll catch, and then it'll run for you. Most expensive piece is this piece right here, this one here. When this goes out, then the whole unit's pretty well really gone. You're going to spend a lot of money. And this is your cooling system itself. It's a big air conditioner. And when that goes out, then it's messed up. But you want to make sure you got eyes like this. You want to make sure that it's always full, never low. There's eyeballs all over on this, but that's your big one right there. You want to burn those up. Your battery's over here. If your alternator goes out on the tractor, you would go and jump start that. And on the tractor itself, there's many parts by the cab where there's a plus and minus, and then you can put that on your battery here. and put on the battery, not the alternator, so battery to battery. And if your alternator goes out on the tractor, then you keep this one on continuous and let this whole system run your truck, and you can go home for a bit and you'll see my videos alternating the alternator, and that's on my head cam, and you'll see how I can bring it all the way back from Utah all the way back to Wisconsin, and it actually charges up the battery. This alternator brings so much juice for the whole system, the computers, the whole bit for the tractor if the alternator goes out. So you're never stuck on the road, you bring it home. Same thing with if the alternator goes out here, then you would charge it with the tractor, and that's battery to battery only, and that way you don't mess up with the computer system. But that's what you got with this this carrier. And then it's all about filling up this oil, and then starting it up and make sure the belts are all right. It's up to about 42. We'll go about 48, so it's not pushing it too hard. It'll cycle at 48, and we'll see how the belts look now. Only thing left is working on the side doors. Now you can see the belts are better now. It's not flopping. It's not flopping now. Now you can see the difference with the belts flopping. Now it's not. I want to make sure I do that right. Now it should turn right back on. But that's the right way to go.